name is Mary Webb, and I'm the Restoration Director at Preserve, Montana. And today we're going to talk about a couple of the finishes that we use most often on our projects, and that is linseed oil and linseed oil paint. We're talking about these two products today because they are the most versatile. They're the most common that we use. We can use it for almost every project that we have. So the two main reasons that we use these products are because of its performance and for health reasons. Performance-wise, these products, they're all natural products. They are linseed oil based, which is the same thing as flaxseed oil. There are no chemicals or VOCs in there. Historically, what was used on exterior wood components was linseed oil based, and for a couple hundred years, linseed oil based paint was the norm until around World War II when latex paint was invented. For numerous reasons, linseed oil paint went out of style, one of which latex paint was a lot easier to use and more convenient. But we have also found many problems with latex paints that linseed oil paint does better with. Fun fact, linseed oil paint is actually what Sherwin-Williams first produced when they started the company back in the 1860s. And linseed oil paint was what they produced until about the 1940s. One of the main problems with latex paint is that it tends to trap moisture behind it. Anytime you have a little crack or a piece of paint flaking off, that is a conduit for moisture to get in there and get behind the latex paint. And then it gets trapped in there and can't find a way out, which causes moisture problems with the wood substrate, and that's where you have wood rotting. Linseed oil, on the other hand, is actually water repellent, but it's also breathable. So if water is able to get in the wood, it also has a chance to dry out. So you don't have standing water that will rot the wood. Some people want to point out that a lot of latex paints now that you can buy come in low VOC, but low VOC doesn't mean no VOC. So there are still volatile organic chemicals in that latex paint. The first product I'm going to talk about is linseed oil. And this oil that I have here is purified, and I've bought it from a distributor. It's different from the oil that you can buy in the hardware store because the hardware store oils still have their proteins in them. They're a little bit lower quality, and the proteins that are left in that oil is what can facilitate mildew growth on the oil or within the oil. And that has traditionally what has given linseed oil a bad rap in the past. But this purified stuff that I've bought from a distributor has had the proteins removed, and so there's a much lower chance of having any mildew growth. Now, when you buy your purified linseed oil from a distributor, you're going to have two different choices. You can either buy raw or boiled. And for the most part, you're going to want the raw linseed oil. And that's because it penetrates into the wood farther, it soaks more up, and that just gives it a more protective quality to it. The boiled linseed oil tends to stay a little bit more on the surface and doesn't soak in quite as well. And so the boiled linseed oil is actually used mostly for paint. You can use linseed oil on pretty much any wood surface, interior or exterior. Just know that there is probably a little bit of prep work to do if the wood has previously been finished. You usually do want to get down to bare wood for the linseed oil so it has the ability to soak into the wood. Linseed oil really is a great product. As far as shelf life goes, it can last pretty much indefinitely. Once you put it on a wood surface, it lasts for a long time as well. And when the wood kind of dries out a little bit, you'll just have to put another coat on, and there is very little prep work for that. And now we're going to talk about linseed oil paint, which is comprised of boiled linseed oil and some natural earth pigments, and depending on what brand, some zinc oxide as a dryer. There's a few differences between linseed oil paint and latex paint. The first one being the amount of colors that you can choose from. There's probably between 40 and 50 colors you can choose from with linseed oil paints, but they can mix pretty much any color that you would want. Another difference between the two is the dry time. With latex paint, you're used to maybe a couple hours before it's completely dry. With linseed oil paint, it can actually take up to a couple days And this depends on the temperature, it depends on the humidity, and just what climate you're in. There's also a difference in the application of the paint, just because of the nature of the linseed oil paint. It is thinner than latex paint, so you do use the same type of brush, but when you're brushing it on, you just want to make sure that you're using a lot less and that you're spreading it out more. One of the biggest differences between latex and linseed oil paint is the cost. A gallon of linseed oil paint does cost a lot more than a gallon of latex paint, but there's a couple considerations when thinking about that cost. Linseed oil paint covers a lot more area than latex paint, and also the time in between reapplications is a lot longer with linseed oil paint. Another great thing about linseed oil paint is it doesn't fail in the traditional sense like latex paint does. It doesn't flake off. It kind of just wears away eventually. It doesn't leave bare wood behind it or anything. And once it kind of starts looking chalky and starts wearing away, you don't even have to repaint the surface. You can just rub the surface with a coat of raw linseed oil to kind of revive the pigments. You can find these products online, and if you want to get started on a linseed oil project, feel free to reach out to Preserve Montana. We'd love to answer any of your questions.